Hi, everybody. Welcome to Star Citizen Live, all about UI. I'm your host, Jared Huckabee, and joining us on the show this week, UI people. People from UI. UI, oh man, I had a joke about UI and I just lost it. Bad start, bad start. Simon, Zane, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jared.
Hello.
How are you?
Good, good. Now we haven't had a UI feature on for some time, so let's take a few moments at the beginning of the show, introduce ourselves, tell us who you are and what you do for Star Citizen. We'll start with Zane. Zane, who are you and what do you do for Star Citizen?
So I'm the principal UI core tech developer here at CIG. What I work on is the core tech for UI, so the kind of the fundamental system that drives the display of user interfaces in the game. Previously, I was the UI director, so I wanted to kind of get more neck deep into the code and the engineering, and to advance the tech much faster to kind of drive our development. So that's been working out really good. Simon here is you can introduce yourself.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm the UI director now, but that means mostly I spend my time organizing things, generally making sure the UI on our various teams is kind of heading the same direction, and making sure it's done on time, that sort of stuff. When I get time, which is not a lot, I do a bit of UI design. So I've been looking into the FPS HUD, the visor, which we can talk about later. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's hard when you reach a director's level. It's a lot of times it's more big picture stuff, more oversight stuff. I was actually excited when I heard, Zane, that you were jumping back into the fray and really getting your hands dirty with the UI stuff again. UI is I'm often quoted as saying UI is a department that affects every single aspect of Star Citizen. Like, I don't think there's an aspect of Star Citizen that doesn't require some assistance or implementation from UI. So it's a super important department, super important discipline for game design, and I'm really excited that you're here and that we're both here and we can answer some questions. We can talk about this. So thank you for taking the time out of your week. I know this is it's a Friday at the end of your week, so thank you for being here. And let's just get right into the questions here. We take questions from a number of sources on Star Citizen Live, in case this is your first show. You can submit your questions in either the Twitch chat or in Spectrum chat by posting your question with the word question in capital letters surrounded by brackets. That'll help our team pull it out from the rest of the conversation. We also put up a thread earlier this week and started collecting questions throughout the week for folks who maybe couldn't be here with us live, or folks who just wanted to vote up which questions they wanted to see answered most. So as always, we're going to start with the what we call the pregame questions, the ones that came in throughout the week on Spectrum that were voted up. Right off the bat, what can you tell us about plans to let users customize their various HUD elements? We have been hearing this for a long time here. Things like prioritizing features, or resizing elements, or changing the color, stuff like that. What are our thoughts on this?
So I guess I could start this one.
Throw you in the deep end right off the bat.
So it's an interesting question, really. I suppose the thing that we would ask first is why do people want to customize things? I get the impression in some cases it's just because the current UI which needs a little bit of updating, is not quite working for people. So I think the first step for us would be to find out those issues that people don't want, the way it's set up that people don't like at the moment, and that's the first thing for us to address. So relating to that, we're doing a lot of rework on the HUD and the MFDs and the FPS visor at the moment. So a lot of those kind of questions, it's great to bring up the reasoning now, and then we can start to incorporate that into these things as we move forward.
Yeah, I know a lot of the discussion about this for a while has been either addressing issues like the glare, that they want to change the color or something because whatever they're flying against matches the color and it's going to be difficult to read. Sometimes people just like different colors, like people just prefer a different orientation, or sometimes it's an actual visual acuity thing. Like some people just have difficulty seeing certain colors on the spectrum, and if you happen to be if you happen to have that weakness right there where the UI is, it can be difficult to read. So I know folks have been asking for the ability to adjust certain elements of the UI for some time. So
Yeah, sure.
But I know that's something we're definitely considering, something we've talked about for a while. And but like you said, it's really important to get the building blocks and to make it as functional as possible before we start introducing customizable elements, if we ever do.
Well, I mean, the thing with building blocks, so basically building blocks is is like our internal term for the UI tech. So the tool that we use to develop UIs, the new one, not the old one. So like a lot of it is allowing for like flexible layouts, or being able to easily reflow elements so they can rearrange themselves very easily relative to each other. And it opens up so much more because we can make the UI so much more dynamic and responsive and flexible, whereas before it's just kind of, if we were to think about like maybe layout customization, or if we had like a grid system, something you can kind of plug into and rearrange on, then it makes it so much easier than before, because everything before was just hardwired. It was very static in nature. But if we have a fully data-driven and flexible system, it kind of opens that up. Now that we can start asking like what makes sense for customization. Like previously, it was just like, yeah, we could do colors, but like it'd be very complicated to do, resizing and things like that. When you have a very statically authored UI. So implementation-wise, it's like much easier now. So it's just basically like, what are the kind of the fundamental issues? Like, we mentioned things about the bright, like, how readable things are against, bright backgrounds, and, you want to change colors. But, we'll kind of allude to this later on, I think. But, there might be a better solution for that. That's right. Goes beyond UI.
Yeah, you hit on a point that Simon made that I think is worth reiterating right now. It's while we're in development, as we want to focus our work on making the best default standard UI possible. And that can only be done if everybody's using the same thing, so that we can see all the feedback, so that we can see all the, how it's working. If you were to introduce customization too early in the process, then it skewers the feedback, because we don't know what this person is using versus what this person is using versus what this person is using. So it's, while you're developing, it's really important everybody has the same thing, so that we can get proper feedback and we can iterate the way that you need to make the best default standard UI we can.
Yep, that's very well put.
Thank
Definitely. Yeah. But if anyone does have suggestions like, we really need to have this thing color changeable because of whatever reasons, then do let us know, and we'll read the comments, and we'll take that into account when we get to it.
I mean, assuming we'll have like easily selectable color blind options as well, that will just change the color.
It's hard.
Things
we can't do all the things all at once, unfortunately.
That's true.
All right, so next question says, currently UI elements like icons of station turrets or mission points can be very invasive, sometimes filling the screen. I've seen this. I've come out of Quantum Jump and just my entire screen is littered with every single turret and everything that's around. What can be done to make this more user-friendly or diegetic?
So, do you want to take this one, or shall I?
You can start.
So this is one thing that I'm really interested in looking at. I'm not sure how soon we're going to get to it, but what we would like to have is some kind of intelligent system. So there's obviously loads of stuff that we could show all over the screen potentially. So points of interest, mission objective markers, ships, and so on. What we need to have is kind of an intelligent system that works on how far away things are, and also a priority that the designers set, and then somehow works out which of those things to show and how many of them to show. So it kind of picks and chooses from this massive selection and shows you the most important things from those. So that would be the starting point to addressing this, I think.
Okay. Next question. This is kind of a big picture one here. As the universe becomes more complex, more and different kinds of entities are vying for space on the HUD. Notifications, POIs, QT destinations, ships, mission markers. How do you manage all this visual information, and can anything be done to give players, the second part was, can we give players the ability to customize? So what can be done to manage all this information? We already answered the last part.
Yeah, so going off of kind of riffing off the stuff that I talked about, the UI tech before, when we have easily flexible layouts and things like that, we can start thinking about making things much more smart about when they display and contextual about when they display. So, for instance, you have this big no target. It's the example that I think Chris gave previously, but you have like this no target big box that's on the screen all the time.
Right.
But if you don't have a target, why not just not have that? And when we apply that to maybe like the MFDs or the HUD, it's like things that you don't need can disappear out of view and reappear when they're needed. So things can be much smarter about when they appear. Things can be a lot more contextual rather than just always being there all the time. So
yeah. And I think one thing relating to this is I think as the game's been built up over the years, there's been a lot of things kind of added on top, kind of little features added here and there. So now we want to take this step back and look at all the stuff that we want to show, and we're going to try and look at the best ways to arrange those on the screen as well. So maybe we, for example, keep the chat in the bottom left, have the objectives in the top right, that kind of thing. So try and work out a layout for the screen that works and where things don't overlap and don't clutter each other. So that's definitely something we're looking into.
Yeah, the chat is like the most obvious example because you have this constant overlap with the ship MFD, and that's actually because it's on two different contexts and they don't know about each other's sizes. So it's if when we actually revamp the whole thing and we rethink, like we're creating, like we're looking at the MFDs right now and we're creating like this whole new system that's just like much more systemic, and there's a grid system where everything kind of fits into each other, and you can create different sizes of widgets. Mm-hmm. So like the chat should you can have that like reflow with something depending on maybe how much you've customized your visor, rather than just being statically placed all the time. So all of this ties into the kind of the functionality and the capability you would have in the new system.
Yeah, and yeah, something we're definitely aware of the overlaps and all that kind of thing, and we definitely want to fix it.
Yeah,
it's a heck of a challenge, and we'll get into it later a bit. But having the diegetic displays on the MFDs and then having the helmet displays, and when you get into a ship, you having both, and building a system that can switch things out and realize, okay, when you've got this on the MFDs, you don't need it on the helmet, and vice versa and stuff. Is an interesting challenge ahead of you guys. And,
I mean, there's a lot of ships where like you have the helmet UI present, even though you've got like a sea of screens. Yeah. So once we can make that enable the ability, that functionality to actually cast things to your visor, then things should even automatically just become much cleaner.
But you're
because we want that anyway. We want the ability to do that, to pull to take things and tear specific parts of the UI out and put it on your visor because maybe it's more useful and you want that more kind of immediately in your view. But it's building up that functionality. It's getting kind of the systemic stuff and kind of the foundation defined first for the MFDs, how things display, when should they display, what goes where, and then building that into the overall design. So that's something like we're spending a lot of time now working on as the tech is being developed alongside that in parallel.
Yeah, one of the things we're doing, because I guess the people at home don't really see it very much, but we're kind of building the tools to help us as developers make really good UI. And then once that's done, then we start putting the good UI in the game so everyone else can see it and use it and give us feedback and that kind of thing.
Well, we're going to work on the people at home seeing that stuff this next quarter of ISC. We're going to get Zane on, maybe something else, and get a couple more UI segments in there so people can better see and understand the work that your team has been doing. From the live chat, I got a question for you. Message spam that we're receiving, the message spam that keeps popping up on the UI. Is that a bug or a design feature?
Well, I think it's kind of a legacy thing from having so many features being added to the game. They're all kind of competing for attention. And the way the current UI is, it's not really, well,
Hasn't scaled
we
well.
could set it up better, basically. Yeah. So this is one of the things we're planning on investigating the visor display generally. And part of that investigation will be, what do we do to this messaging system to make it work for people? So we can do things like, for example, we can give the messages priority. So if something really important comes up, that kind of overrides the other stuff that's there. We could give things timers so they stay on for a set time, and potentially just not show more than a certain number of messages in the same amount of time. So there's plenty of little tools we can apply to that to make it work better.
Yeah, I think it's mainly just that we had that notification widget in the center there, and as more features got added on over time, especially the mission stuff, all the new mission stuff that kind of came in, it kind of latched onto that, and now it's spamming like 100 missions. So I mean, before it's just it had a few notifications, but we need to kind of take that into account and have a system that's much smarter about what notifications should display there versus maybe the missions probably would be better served by, just like a pulsing icon with a number on it, indicating the number of new missions that you haven't read yet.
Yep.
Things like when you get like a new email and your inbox says like 1 or there's 2 or there's 3,
exactly.
Like that can pulse on each new mission that comes in rather than just like boom, this new mission is now available and it's like taking up 10% of your screen.
Yeah.
So something that's much smarter, more elegant.
Yeah,
like
definitely.
that.
Another thing we're considering is kind of splitting it out a little bit. So you've got your kind of messages in one place, and then it's quite likely we'd have a sort of mission objective area that shows you your current mission related stuff, and we might as well have a separate thing for the kind of keyboard shortcuts and that sort of thing. There's little hints that pop up. So kind of move those things to different parts of the screen so they're not kind of always competing for the same space.
Speaking of competing for the same space, we got a question from the live chat here that speaks to those of us who have non-standard resolution monitors. What are we doing to support non-1080p resolutions? Many Star Citizens tend to be on the cutting edge of technology and have these 21 by 9 monitors or 32 by 9 monitors. If you're my dad. What are we doing to help the UI play better on that? Every time a patch comes out, sometimes the star map or the ship HUD doesn't exactly work real well with the wider screen resolutions.
That's a good one for Zane.
So it's one thing is because again, as I mentioned before, is like all of our UI is authored in a very static manner. So we would be able to in our stuff that we have our flexible layout. We're developing the ability to have flexible layouts. Those can, we can have that resized potentially depending on your aspect ratio, your monitor. So everything remains visible on screen. But the challenge also is that things are in world as well. So while maybe the mobiGlass might be in world, we could also take what is your current screen resolution and be able to scale that UI, even though it is diegetic and it is in the world. Also, maybe like a combination of that and field of view changes, although that's something we're still kind of looking into in terms of getting that all to work.
Yeah, it's hard when prioritization is. Cannot be understated how important it is to prioritize the things that we work on, because like we said before, you can't work on all the things all at once. And those widescreen monitors, while they're certainly cool and stuff like that, they are generally edge cases in the overall population of Star Citizen. So oftentimes we have to prioritize the things that affect the most number of users first before we start going to the edge cases. But I
was going to say that's something that affects the dev teams here as well, because everybody's working on these cool new features. So every quarter or every few weeks even, we get people saying, "Oh, we've got this cool thing. Can you do the UI for it?" And we have such a big list to choose from. We have to pick and choose the most important ones, and then kind of leave the rest till a little bit later.
Yeah, I swear half of the game development is just prioritization. It's probably a saying somewhere that I don't know about. All right, what's going on? Let's see. Are there any plans to add keyboard integration in navigating the various interfaces we encounter, in addition to just the mouse? Like even just hitting the arrow keys on the keyboard to go up and down in a UI thing, something like that.
Yeah. So we want to we want to design our UI to be like, it's much more keyboard friendly. So right now you can only use the mouse, and that's just kind of rubbish, I think, because having that keyboard access, like whether it's an MFD or even when you're like in a shopping console, having the keyboard able to navigate with that makes things a lot easier, because even if you have a mouse and you're interacting with it, you have kind of those two controls at the same time, and it can be much faster to go through different menus with the keyboard navigation. But it also it allows us to kind of simplify a lot of stuff as well. Yeah.
I think we'd really like to be able to have people should be able to play the game with a variety of controllers, so they can use the keyboard and mouse, just the keyboard, or
joystick,
or a gamepad as well. So I think if you, in a way, like Zane was saying, if you design for the most difficult thing, which is potentially the gamepad, if you make a UI design that works for that, you're generally doing a kind of simple and elegant design anyway. So it's quite often a good way to approach things generally. And as we go through and redesign these various bits of the screens, so for example, we're starting to look at the MFDs at the moment. We've got this sort of high-level design at the moment, and as those start to get implemented, that's probably one of the first areas where we start to have this more kind of uniform control method that caters for everybody, or most people.
Yeah, like for example, if you're managing the individual items in an MFD. But like there can be maybe 3 or 4 different actions that are that you can partake upon that when you have it selected. You can be much quicker about doing that with like shortcuts rather than kind of hunting for the button with your mouse.
But of course, anytime you're dealing with keyboard shortcuts, you're fighting for real estate at that point with other features. Anybody who's ever looked at our key mapping,
you can be contextual about what keys are available in what modes. So. If you're interacting with an MFD, potentially you might not need some stuff that's normally otherwise. So,
all right. In a previous show, this was a while ago, we mentioned that we're moving away from the Flash and Scaleform stuff for HUD UI in favor of a homegrown solution. What can you tell us about that? What progress have we made? Where are we at?
So, I've kind of already touched on a little bit on the previous questions, but yeah, we used Flash, and we're still using it now, but we're trying to get away from it. So we're kind of in this phase where we're transitioning away from using Flash, this kind of this program where we're baking our assets into a much more fully data-driven system. So previously in Flash, you kind of set things up. It's very static. You don't see what it looks like in game until you actually export it and reload the editor. Also, the actual interface with the game code is much more simplified. So before, we actually had to write classes for each individual field that you wanted to modify, and you had to then create a class to manage that field on the Flash side. So you kind of, in a lot of cases, had like artists fiddling with code, which is just not ideal. It's just rubbish. So in our new system, we have like the standard API where any game programmer and any team could actually expose some variables, what we call bindings variables. So the example is like an ammo counter on a weapon. The game programmer can just kind of register a variable, ammo count, and then in our UI tech, we can actually create a node and then specify the name of that variable or select from it, from a list of available variables, and then just plug it straight into a text field. It's that easy. And we see it live. We see it updated live in the game. In fact, we can actually be an editor and be in game. You could be like a character and have health and everything and work on a UI. So it's quite cool. It's taking so it's still using Scaleform as a renderer. So we kind of cut out the process of actually authoring the UI in Flash, and it's actually our own tools and our own data-driven system. But we're still using Scaleform to draw the vectors. So we boil it down to just the renderer. So things like when we're drawing borders, we're drawing backgrounds, we're drawing like curved corners and things like that, and we're rendering text. That's all it really does, and everything else on top of that is our own code and our own system. So at some point, we will take that render and we will build our own. So it's almost like an abstraction layer between our own tools and our own development and the renderer, and then at some point we switch that out for just be completely rid of it.
How long have you been waiting to kill Flash?
Since I started the company 6 years ago, even more than that.
One thing that's really cool that we're finding as well is because we kind of own this tech and we've got a team working on it, we can say, I suppose, just going back to Flash, Flash was originally designed as an animation system for web stuff. So if you wanted to make a bar in that, you can do it. It takes a little time. But if someone goes, yeah, I don't like that kind of bar, can you turn it into a dial? That's going to take loads of extra work. Whereas with the building block stuff, we can just swap those over. And also, for example, if the dial thing didn't exist yet, we can just go to the programs and say, we could really do with the dial widget. And once that's made, then we can reuse that wherever we want to within the rest of the UI. So it gives us a lot of control as developers.
Yeah, and also because it's fully data-driven. Everything in the UI is programmatically drawn and driven from data. So we don't have to really worry as much about other artists stomping over each other's work because you can merge it in.
Right.
One change can be merged with another change without having to fiddle with and resolve conflicts over two binary files that change and then hunting for which library symbol was changed, and it's much easier in so many different ways that maybe I can't list all of them right now.
Right. All right, let's get into some of the more in-game stuff, the experience that people are having with the UI. I got a section here for personal UI and helmet stuff. What are your thoughts on being able to? Nope, we already did that one. We covered that one already. Has there been any discussion about adding a compass ribbon, giving us cardinal directions on planets or moons?
So, well, I suppose that's another of those is what's the reason for wanting it? So it's
what's the reason for wanting to know what direction you're going?
Well, yes, but there are other ways to solve that potentially. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a compass widget. One thing we're looking into, you probably saw it on one of the earlier videos. When we showed the area map, this interior map. I think we had it on there. We had a little mock-up of a personal radar that kind of shows you like a mini map, essentially. Something like that could show you your direction, for example. So having a little compass is not necessarily the only solution. But as we revise the HUD, the visor stuff, which we're starting at the moment, then if it seems like that's a compass, for example, is really necessary, then we'd certainly consider that and investigate it.
Yeah, it's probably not out of the question. It's just, you also have to take into account that the planets are procedurally generated, and you kind of have to have a way to define what's north, west, east, south.
Exactly. We'd have to create poles. We have to create poles for the planet, simulate magnetic poles, as it were, and then, be able to position you.
Yeah, and you can solve some of the navigation problems with things like if we had some kind of sat-nav-like system in there, which I know there were some questions about in the chat. Something like that could also solve the problem in a different way. So there's.
Yeah, the compass ribbon is more than just a UI question, because again, you can't just program a UI thing and have it work. There's system design that has to go into it in order to build a relationship on that planet that lets you lock to it. And then of course there'd have to be different ones for every single planet and moon, and it would have to know when you're transferring from one to another, and so because you don't want to be on Yella and have it be pointing you towards north on Hurston and stuff like that. So
There's a lot of these edge cases make UI complicated sometimes. We think we've got something really easy to do, and then you know, oh, there's these 5 things that we hadn't thought about.
Yeah, it's one of those things, there are a lot of things that sometimes seem like they're a UI issue, and it's not. It can be a system design issue. That it's UI in its most basic sense exposes information that's built by other system designers and game designers and stuff. So if that system hasn't been developed, there's no way for the UI team to expose it.
Yeah.
Is it possible to have a button to hide the HUD or a button to reactivate it when needed? These are probably from screenshot folks who just want to clear everything from the screen and get the cleanest image they can.
We get a lot of developers asking us that. How do you hide the HUD?
Yeah.
What CVAR do I need to invoke to hide it?
Right.
So, especially for the director's cam and being able to record stuff. That's yes. We'll definitely be improving that system as we overhaul our UI. So we'll take that into account. The same thing that we do there will also help us developers also hide HUD for screenshots we take internally. So like we can specify certain sections of the UI, like whether that's just the ship HUD, but maybe not the visor, right? Or I want to hide all UI, but I don't want to hide the UI that's just in the environment that helps kind of bring it to life, like background fluff screens. So things like that, we need to have like differentiated CVARs, so we can kind of leverage that when we're building the system to maybe expose something to the players as well, to kind of hide the UI, like when you're trying to record stuff and you don't want all these markers on your screen that's just destroying the scene. So
there's one thing that relates to this, which is for the general UI, especially for the visor, for the FPS stuff, we want to have a system where it only shows you the UI that's relevant at the time. So, for example, if you put your weapon away, you don't really need to see the weapon display on the corner of the screen, or potentially you wouldn't show the health until you actually get injured, that kind of thing. So that should as well help with this kind of perception of cluttered screen in a way. So right. If we only show things when they're really needed, then that's going to also feel a bit nicer just for the day-to-day players as well.
Yeah, that ties into that kind of like contextually driven stuff that I was talked about before.
Okay. Are there any plans to allow a chat UI to be viewed when we're not wearing a helmet? I think we've mentioned the possibility of a special like contact lens or something. Just to see our chat when we're in player clothes down on Area 18 or something.
Yes, is the answer. So yeah, it's a multiplayer game, so you need to be able to see what your teammates are doing and talking to you about and so on. So we definitely do have plans to have that visible pretty much all the time. So if you've got a helmet, you just got your lens, which is the state without the helmet, in the ship, third-person view as well potentially. So yes, we would like to have that in sometime soon.
Okay. You actually touched on this a while back. The next question is about that interior map that we showed a while back. The little, like the mini map or the 3D map. What progress have we made? Where's that at? This question is asking. They just really want it, please. It literally says, I don't have a question. Let me read it actually. A couple years ago, we were shown interior maps on the player HUDs. Years ago, I don't think it was years. But I don't have a question. I really just want it, please, is what the question said.
I think that's one you can answer.
Yeah, I know. I really want it too. I mean, that was one of the first things that we started working on when I started here, and it's going to be a really cool addition. So we kind of got a development version that's halfway there, I suppose, at the moment. But we made a decision fairly recently that what we were going to do is focus on getting the ship HUDs and the FPS HUD sorted out first. So as they're kind of more integral to the overall gameplay, we want to get them right, get them playing well, and then we're going to go back to the area map stuff later on. Hopefully really soon. It depends a bit on what else comes up, but yeah, we'd love to get that up and running. And also that's going to tie into this, well, you'll have the full screen version where you can look around the whole area, and also this little mini map that you get on your visor as well. So it's going to be useful to players, especially as they're exploring interiors.
Okay. You said ship HUD. Let's move into the ship HUD questions. I thought you could avoid it. No. Ship HUD. right off the bat, why does quantum calibration mode, scanning mode, mining mode, and any other sub-UI mode take away or hide crucial flight information, such as speed, altitude, attitude, and any other useful information needed for basic flight?
So they're basically developed in under the hood as different contexts. In our overhaul of the design, we're factoring that all that flight HUD information, so it's all available to you, regardless of whether you're kind of in scanning or in mining mode or whatever it is, because it is still relevant. You can still fly, so therefore you should still retain all your flight information that you need. So in those modes, we're looking at potentially contextually changing out the screens themselves. So rather than just having the HUD change for these different modes, we can leverage the screens in some capacity, contextually changing some of the elements, shifting elements around so that certain information that's relevant to that mode can be displayed, rather than just kind of taking up your entire HUD as well.
So it's something that has happened over the course of development, but not an intention to take away crucial flight information when you're trying to spool up your quantum drive.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, sometimes with these things, you don't realize that it's going to cause issues until you try it, and that's probably one of those cases.
Yeah, integrations are a bitch. Let's just put it that way. That's where most bugs come from. Everything works fine in your own little branch, and then it's integrating it in with everything else where bugs and all these issues come into play.
Yeah, all the outside factors that you didn't quite think of start to
well, there's a thing your team is working on here, and then there's a thing somebody else is working on here, and in their own little universes they work great, and then it's when you integrate them into game dev, and that's where all the collisions and stuff happens. So that's how bugs are made. That's the story of the birds and the bugs. Never mind. I'm kind of off today. It's weird. All right. Can you update us on plans for the landing UI improvements needed for the implementation of hover mode? It's hard to land in hover mode. That's basically what they're saying.
So when we actually a while back we changed the method that we actually used to render the UI from what was called 3DI to rendered to texture. So it's actually rendered as part of the screens, and it actually takes all of the kind of post effects and everything. So the original landing UI that replaced the radar, what it was built on was the 3DI tech, and that just wasn't compatible with the rendered to texture. So that's kind of how we lost it. So we're looking at bringing that back in some capacity, but maybe with just as a better design. We're just focusing mainly on the structure and the layout of the MFDs right now, kind of defining, as I said, what contexts are available, what things should be displayed, where, when, how. But yeah, that's definitely something that we need, and as part of that, also potentially having some kind of guide system as well. So you can, in having some AR element that is displayed in conjunction with that widget.
We touched on this a little bit before when we talked about the customization thing and how we want to, build our own default stuff first. So one of the big problems here, let's get into it. How do we intend to improve the legibility of UI elements that tend to sit over the environment, an environment that can sometimes be very glaring? I mean, everybody's played Star Citizen has experienced this. If you point your ship anywhere remotely near the star at the center of the Crusader system, all of your UI elements wash out. What are we intending to do about that?
So there's a few kind of more in-world solutions that we're looking at. I mean, the obvious thing you can do is potentially add a drop shadow of the UI or just make it black or something, but that just kind of destroys the aesthetic of what we're trying to go for. So one thing that we're looking at is, and we started this a bit with the Gladius side, although it's not completely there yet, is having some system where it's contextually, it's dynamically taking the brightness of the environment and adjusting the brightness of the UI in response to that. In addition, to make things look and feel much more in world, we want to kind of have the HUDs displayed on actual geometry that you can see. So it kind of grounds it in the world much better. But as part of that, we can kind of leverage that to maybe dynamically tint that, in addition to brightening the UI based upon environmental conditions. So it's a much more, we're thinking of that as like a much more like in world, and it uses it leverages the in-game elements in a way that's kind of it's more convincing than just kind of making it like black or something. So.
Is there something we can do beyond just brightening? Is that the only thing that?
Well, it's like just taking the HUD for instance. It's like a combination of tinting that physical glass plane a little bit, but also brightening the UI that's on it. So it's almost like when you have your phone on automatic brightness and you go out in the sunlight,
right.
It can automatically adjust to make it more readable. Because right now, if you notice, it's actually an issue with the eye adaptation, where if you go down onto the planet, the UI, even you'll see it on your screens as well. It actually, compared to when you're in space, it's very dim in sunlight. Mm-hmm. So it's about kind of taking those environmental conditions and then using that to potentially brighten stuff up. But it's something that we're looking into and kind of we talked a little bit about with our graphics team. So that, as well as also potentially having some kind of effect in the UI tech and the UI rendering tech to like things like the health widget, for instance. Like maybe it's not just stuff in your visor, having like a backdrop that's not just a black square, but it's a little more elegant. It's like a blurred frosted glass effect that helps with readability, and also not just against bright backgrounds, but also busy backgrounds. You just have a lot of dark, and if it's too busy, like if it's like a fence or something,
you kind of get
it gets lost.
You get kind of a camouflage effect. All the visual noise kind of disguises the UI on top. So being able to blur that out should help with that.
Mm-hmm. Right. A lot of the suggestions, the community offers no shortage of suggestions. A lot of the suggestions that come from the community often focus around adding a small black stroke around letters or putting a drop shadow behind text or stuff. Is that stuff not something we can consider, or?
Definitely we can definitely consider things along those lines. It depends how subtle you are about it as well. If you have a really obvious outline or drop shadow, like Zane said, that's not necessarily going to fit with the sort of sci-fi look that we're going for. There may be ways to do something very subtly, so it's very
it can be very subtle. So I wouldn't say it's like out of the question or anything, but it's not just overbearing too strong that it just looks cartoony.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Right. You don't want it to look like a cartoon.
Yeah. So we want to just explore the ideas that I've described before, and then we'll just see where we're at with that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we want the UI to be readable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just as much as people want the UI to be readable. So
it's going to be one of those things like a lot of the UI where we basically want to try out a few different options. So we concept different ideas, like we could do it this way or this way, and then step back and look and decide which is going to solve it the best way.
Gotcha.
And then pick that and go and put it in.
Currently, the MFDs on ships have a default configuration that must be changed each time the pilot gets back into the pilot seat. I know. Are there intentions to add the ability to save custom MFD configuration presets for individual players' preferences?
Oh yeah, I mean that's got to persist at some point. It's just the issue is now it doesn't persist.
Right.
So I will say in our new UI tech, the UI will be what we call stateless. So it won't store anything. It won't store any state about itself. It takes everything from like an entity or what's on the server. So basically, when we go to develop the MFD or implement the new design that we're working on, by that point, hopefully we'll be able to persist. Like as you enter and exit the seat, you'll see the same screens that you were on before, even if you've tabbed over or you've shifted things around. So it's definitely something we want to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing related to that, we want to, when we do this pass on the MFDs, we want to make sure that we're showing the most important information by default as well.
Yeah.
So I'm sure people will be able to change things and so on, but it would mean that there'd be less need for the kind of the first time player, for example, to swap things around. Hopefully it'll be set up in a way that's good for the general players.
Potentially presets as well that you can quickly activate. You may want something that's a configuration, a screen configuration. When we go to kind of enable the visor configuration as well, having presets associated with those that you can quickly access is something we can look at as well.
Yeah, plenty of things to consider.
Yeah, the ship MFDs, put it diplomatically, can be a bit cumbersome. Having to drill down from one menu to the next menu to the next menu to the next menu to finally get to the thing that you're looking for. And in a combat situation, that those seconds can be deadly. I know we're in the process of working out a complete refactor of the ship MFDs, right?
That is correct.
Anything you can tell us about that?
So, where do we start?
Yeah, where do we start? I mean, I already kind of touched on it a little bit. I mean, yeah. So, I mean, right now, I guess the most obvious thing is that like they're just small and they're scaled down. They're not readable. And I mean, we used to have what we would call these support screens, where we kind of have this screen that had minimal information on it, but its font size was made in a way that was legible. Mm-hmm. So we're kind of looking at this system where, by default, you have a kind of a contextually a different setup on your screens. A setup, I mean, a more minimized display. So it's like showing you really only what you need to know. But where all the font sizes are very legible. So it's really just about how much pixels the screen is taken up on your screen, on your monitor, when you're kind of in the default view. But when you're focused in on a screen, what that can do is it can contextually change to something that's more in depth that we want on the MFDs. So whether you're focusing in on MFD or you're in flight mode, that will contextually change to present you with always readable information.
I get you.
Yeah. So
when you're sitting back in your seat, the
layout
MFDs will change, and it'll be only the most necessary information, big, legible, and then when you zoom in and look into it, it'll sense that and it'll change and reformulate and show you more information.
Yeah, actually, the cool thing about the UI tech that I'm helping develop is that we're kind of taking cues from the area of like web development, because that's my background too, so I know a lot about it. But you have this thing called responsive design, so you can have rules set up where beyond a certain point, like if there's a box in our UI that goes beyond a certain point, that it shrinks down beyond a certain point, that you can actually have different styles or visual descriptions applied to that, and conditionally depending on maybe how much it's sized. So we're kind of leveraging that to help with the reformulation of the UI on screens, as well as when we're laying things out and when we potentially open up customization, that can be really helpful as like a tool to help us manage and maintain the UI, because even on like different size screens in the game, you have like 69, you have 4.3s, you have 1.1s. Currently, we have to maintain 3 different binary files for those. And if you want to make a change in one, well, you have to go into each binary file and make that same change. But if we can just maintain one UI and then just have these different style rules applied to it,
right,
then it makes it much easier to maintain. So you just change one thing and it changes for every different manufacturer or every different kind of configuration. and it all works. So, yeah, it's a bit of a tangent. But.
That's all right.
It's all right. No, we'd love tangents.
There's one thing might be interesting is the actual process that we're going through with those. We've got Mark Colleran, he's quite famous for UI fans out there. He's looking through the designs we've already got, like what's in the game now, and also working very closely with the vehicles team, talking to them, what do you want to show on these screens, and kind of trying to plan out generally what's in all the MFDs, and then going and redesigning each screen to kind of get the best out of it. So we're at that stage now, and then as Zane's team progresses the UI tech, eventually we'll get to a point where the screens are redesigned, the tech's ready, and then we'll start to put those in the game.
I was just Googling Mark Colleran now. Cargo UI. Let's talk about cargo UI. Right now, players have to go back to kiosks to see the inventory of what they're carrying on their ships. Do we have any plans for implementing some kind of shipboard cargo UI so that we can see what we're carrying without having to get to a destination first?
Yeah, there definitely should be.
Yep,
yeah.
It's something that we will look at. Yes, so we know that's needed, and yeah, where it comes in the timeline, I'm not sure, but at some point, yeah.
That wasn't on the list. That was just one I put in there myself.
Yes, Derek.
Well done.
Are there any plans to allow us to prioritize the use of missiles or torpedoes through MFDs?
I think that's another thing that we're going to look at as well. So I believe
we had that previously. I think it broke.
Yeah, I think John Crew commented on this one. I think the way it is at the moment, the UI actually supports that, but there's a bit of refactoring he's doing in the background to get the weapons set up to match up. So it's something we do want to do, and it will be there in the future at some point. Yeah.
Right.
And a better design for it rather than just clicking up. Yeah.
Are there any plans to allow us to see points of interest in other UI modes? Right now, we only see them in, I think, the quantum drive mode.
Yeah. So I think this is definitely something I'd be interested in. It's one of those things. It kind of relates back to that thing we were talking about before with managing how much information you show. So if we get it to a point where we can, I suppose, cut down the amount of icons and things to a sensible level, then we can consider whether it's worth putting those in other views as well. So it's definitely something that we should look at. Which views it goes into and how much, and if it even goes into certain ones, I don't know at this stage, but that's one of those things where you have to get the system in, try it, and then decide where's the best places to use
it's very much iterative.
What about an ETA marker? When we go to quantum travel, we see the distance ticking down, but based on the capabilities of our ship and the type of quantum drive we have, something that tells us how long it's going to take, so I know if I can get up and go to the bathroom or not.
Yep, I think that's a good idea. I think we were looking at that question earlier and saying, hey, what do you think about this? And generally everyone's like, yeah, we should do that. So that's definitely something we'll look to adding in at some point. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we have an ETA for when your oxygen runs out, so I don't see a reason why we would have an ETA for that.
Yeah.
All right. For inner thought, in the current inner thought system through floating menus, is that closer? Is that? What are our thoughts on inner thought? I'm trying to reword the question a bit. It kind of wanders around. But this person is asking about if we're happy with where inner thought is right now, or if we've got plans to continue to iterate on it.
Well, I know there's a lot of cases where inner thought kind of appears where ideally it shouldn't. So like things over screens, like when you're, I guess the obvious example is when you're in an airlock, you get an inner thought saying press the screen, whereas why not just we should just have the press to screen, and that's something our UI tech allows for now. So we can actually have like buttons in the UI. So when you're specifying maybe like what floor you want to go up to, like in an elevator or something, that can be buttons that you click on in an actual UI, rather than having this inner thought option that's kind of doesn't really make sense in the world. So
we'll probably look at the visuals a bit as well, because it's okay, it's usable and so on, but I'm sure we can make it look a bit prettier. We do have some other interaction stuff going on at the moment that we're kind of figuring out, which could be quite cool that relates to that. But that's probably something we want to save till a little bit later, till there's more to show.
Thank you. I was literally about to say. A long time ago, from the live chat here, we talked about the potential of manufacturer-specific UIs. Like you get into an Anvil and the UI is Anvil. You get into an Aegis and Aegis ship and the UI is Aegis. Is that still on the plan? Is that still on the roadmap? Is it still in the car?
Yes, and it's much more possible now with the UI tech because we have the style sheet system. So, as I was kind of describing it before, everything had to be baked into binary assets. So if we wanted to have different manufacturers' styles, this would require one file for Anvil, one file for RSI, one file for Origin.
Gotcha.
Oh, we want to change, this thing and that thing, and let's add this feature in, and we got to display it. So, that's going into all these different binary files, adding that UI, adding the code. But with style sheets, we could just have one kind of white box UI, and we just the visual description is defined and applies to that. So, we actually have this example now in our kind of rough initial implementation in the UI tech where we actually select from a dropdown. First have like RSI, and that applies a set of rules like, the corners are maybe 10 pixel chamfer and the font color is this and so forth and so on. But then we switch to Origin and everything's kind of more elegant. It's all the style is changed just via dropdown because it's data driven, so it's not like it's baked in.
One thing that could be cool with it as well is once the system's in place, it gives us more opportunity to hand it over to the graphic designers. So if you've got a guy who comes up with a really cool retro design for one of the ships, for example, it's a lot easier for us to kind of drop that into the game and have it work now. So there's less dependence on someone going into Flash and knowing how to code in Flash and use its kind of slightly outdated interface. So it should really help when we get to that stage.
Yeah, there's a lot of properties now that you can modify with these style rules. So a lot of possibilities and a lot of ways to differentiate between manufacturers. But also, it's not just styling as well. It's also, when we get to it, it's also kind of the way you lay things out as well. So things like ships like Origin, MISC will have more holographic UI. And it's part of our tech. And actually, we're investigating the initial engineering requirement for this, but making it so you can have 3D UI as well. So being able to, in the tech and the tools for a developer to build a UI where they can manipulate different planes in the Z-axis. So make a 3D UI and have it look really holographic. So having that kind of style for the more kind of what you say technically advanced ships versus more retro ones. I think we have just the retro one just fitted in every ship right now.
Yeah.
But that'll eventually be something we definitely want. We want to differentiate quite significantly between like the different tech levels of the ships, I guess you'd call it.
You just gave every VR enthusiast heart palpitations, Zane. We're almost out of time. Let's talk about mobiGlas. We haven't really touched about mobiGlas. Two questions, really. One, the responsiveness of mobiGlas can sometimes be a little slow. Is that a engineering thing? Is that a UI thing? Do we have any thoughts about that? You may not be the people to ask. I don't know.
No, I mean, I think the usability of that. I mean, the time it takes to get up. The animation and the whole boot up sequence can be vastly reduced. It's just we're not focused on mobiGlas at the moment. Yeah. Actually, the whole UI we're looking to overhaul on that as well. But I mean, it's really we just got to set a target time, like 0.6 seconds or something like that.
Yeah.
And have as long as we have that, then we can fit the animation around that, whatever needs to happen.
Yeah, and one thing with it, I guess, it's the mobiGlas is this holographic display that projects out of the device itself. So there's no reason why we couldn't have that start to appear as the arm comes up, for example, rather than waiting for it to do
right
that.
Now right now it's very sequential.
Yeah.
there's no reason, especially with the new tech, we can actually start it up now without having to wait for the animation to complete.
Yeah.
You just said that mobiGlas isn't a focus right now, and that's what my second question was. Is there anything you can tell us about the future of mobiGlas, after having said that it's not the focus right now?
I suppose it's a similar kind of thing to the. I suppose what we're doing with the ship MFDs, we'll once we've got the ship stuff and the visor stuff sorted out, then we probably start to look at that. So we'll look at everything that's in there now, and also talk to the game designers and find out what's the overall intention for the game design as well, and try and kind of rework it to match those, and also incorporating the new tech. So it's definitely due an overhaul, I think, and we can make it a lot better. So I'm quite looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's because it's also like holographic in nature. It sort of depends on the UI tech being able to do 3D as well. So before we even implement that, we need to have the foundational tech to actually do the 3D effects that we want in the mobiGlas to be there. So I mean, all the 2D stuff that goes on like a flat plane, that's all quite far along. There's still some engineering work to make it so you can kind of slice things up and make in-world panels out of that and be able to position that anywhere in the world.
All right, last question, gentlemen, before we let you go. This came in from the live chat. It's legitimate, I didn't ask. Is the UI team hiring, and what skills are needed most?
That's you.
See. Well,
Zane's like, hey, I'm out of that stuff now. That's you, Simon.
Yes, I think at the moment, probably the job specs are slightly out of date on the website, which we'll update soon. We're definitely looking for at least a programmer on the UI team at the moment. We've got so much stuff that people want to put in. It's kind of sad when you have to say no to everything. So getting someone else on board to help do that is good. At the moment, we're not really looking for artists and graphic designers, although that may change in future. And I guess if people are interested in applying, what's the essential things we're looking for? I suppose for programmers, it's a case of being able to show your experience and also having a knowledge of what makes good UI really. Like why do things work that you see in other games, all that kind of thing. For artists, we tend to look at, I suppose, quite a lot of graphic design stuff, because a lot of our job involves coming up with cool logos and buttons and that kind of thing. So if you've got a sense for art, that really helps. But also this kind of, it's quite hard to teach it, but this understanding of if you take a particular screen, why is this screen good on this particular app, or what could I do to improve it? Sort of thinking about that kind of thing is a really helpful skill.
One thing as part of the also the UI tech team that we have, it'd be helpful to actually have a tools programmer as well. So right now what we're working on is kind of the low-level stuff where I've mentioned a lot of times in this that everything is now data-driven, but that's actually raw data. So when we're actually implementing this stuff, we're kind of poking into raw data. So one thing that we want to do that I kind of tempted to make a head start on this quarter, but is the editor for it's kind of there's the low level stuff, and then there's the layer that the designers and artists will interface with. Right. So creating a UI editor that's intuitive and is easy to use is something that we're hiring for as well. So like a tools programmer that can help build an editor would be very handy.
Yeah,
yep.
You make a good point. We don't just develop things for our backers. We actually there are several members throughout the company whose purpose is to develop tools for us to use to develop stuff for the backers and stuff like that. So yeah, any developing those tools is an essential part of any game design. And I don't think we cover it nearly enough on ISC or anything like that. So you just gave me an idea for another segment. So thank you, Zane.
Awesome.
All right, that's it. That's all we got time for this week. Zane, Simon, thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Thank you.
I think we've obviously had Zane on ATV and stuff before, but I think this is both of your first live Friday show. How was it?
First for me.
Yeah, I don't think I've done this before.
Yeah, I don't think either one of you had done the Friday show. You okay?
Yeah.
It was surprisingly easy.
Yeah.
So yeah, good job.
It was all right.
You're not going to write a letter to Chris and be like, I hated this. Or anything.
Not today.
All right. Thanks, guys. That's it for the show. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Bye.
See you.
Thanks for watching. For the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42, you can subscribe to our channel, or you can check out some of the other shows, and you can also head to our website at www.robertsspaceindustries.com. Thank you very much for watching.